Hi. I'm Owlbear Rogue. Welcome to the cave. I'm back. I spent all last week at DragonCon, and I am having a serious case of the super sads trying to return to regular life. Life where elves don't parade through the room, singing and ringing bells. Life where people don't dress up as cicadas and stand screaming up against the walls. There's an extreme lack of puppets here in the real world. A lack of Scooby-mobiles zooming by. Everyone is dressed in perfectly normal clothes. If you've never heard of DragonCon, it's an enormous fan-run, wide-ranging nerd convention that takes place in Atlanta over Labor Day weekend every year. I've been going since 2019, and it's an event I look forward to and plan for all year long. There's nothing else like it. Even with all these years going, I don't really know how to describe it to someone who hasn't been before. I'm already counting the days until I can once again party with 75,000 of my closest friends. In addition to the cosplaying and the miniature painting and the photo shoots, the panels, the live play events with Baldur's Gate cast members, all the regular con shenanigans, I ran some games. And it was an absolute blast. I got a volunteer badge for it. It was awesome. If you are one of the fine folks who shared a table with me, thank you. Thank you. You were all the best. I ran for 5 different groups. I wound up being 31 people total, and I enjoyed hanging out with every single one of you. And if you hadn't guessed from my tendency to hide behind an animated character who lives in a cave, meeting new people isn't exactly something I naturally get jazzed about. So you were extra cool. In addition to having fun playing with everyone, you all helped me to take the one shot that I brought to the con and polish it. It is super smooth and sparkly now. I could run it in my sleep. The one shot we played was called The Midnight Relic, a gothic horror heist. It's a one shot that I created for a group of new players a little while back. I spent a lot of time and money making sexy maps for it. I figured since I'd invested so much in it, I should run it as much as possible. Also, I had it designed with beginners in mind, and it's a good mix of roleplay, sneaking around, it is a heist after all, and combat. I decided it would be perfect to take, and I was very happy with the decision. If you're intrigued by the sound of The Midnight Relic, a gothic horror heist, fear not. Or wait, maybe fear a whole bunch, because it's such gothic horror, much scary, big, But I will be releasing a new spooky Halloween one-shot every week for the rest of the month of September. I like running a Halloweeny one-shot or 2 every year, and if you're thinking about doing the same, you're going to have 3 new ones to choose from come October and a few weeks to get them ready. I'll be starting with the Midnight Relic next week, so tune in Thursday for a spooky one-shot that has been enjoyed and fine-tuned now by dozens of players. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my tips for running a game at a con, an event, or just for strangers in general. Some say a stranger is a friend you just haven't met yet. I say a stranger is someone you haven't coerced into being part of your gaming circle yet. Let's jump in. My first tip for DMing an event is to communicate with the people running it. This may sound simple, but a lot of people helping run events like this are volunteers and may even be more introverted than a certain cave-dwelling rogue. Ask the people in charge what they need, what they expect. Take the initiative in being the big communicator. Make sure you're on the same page about the kind of game you're bringing, the system, how long you have to run it, how many people can play at a time. Does it need to be kid-friendly? Are there certain themes they'd like you to gravitate towards or avoid? What do they expect you to bring, and what will they provide? Even things like, will there be power available if you need it? I normally run games with my little laptop open behind my DM screen. I've got outlines in Google Docs. I've got ambiance coming out of my YouTube, and I can quickly look up any spells or rules I need a refresher on. For this con, though, there were only a few tables that had access to power, so I had to do things differently. Don't assume anything is going to be provided for you. I brought scratch paper and pencils for my folks, and I was glad I did. Also, think about the sound levels where you're going to be. More often than not, if this is some kind of event, be prepared for it to be loud. Bring a throat lozenge, some water, find your outdoor voice, put in your hearing aid, and be considerate of the other tables around you. Full disclosure, I'm kind of bad at that part. I get excited and loud. Oops, I'm sorry, guys. Speaking of being considerate, as you create your game, think about how you can make the game comfortable and accessible to whomever might show up. Really think about your content. If someone of a different sex, sexual orientation, religion, cultural background from you, etc., sits down to play this game, are they going to have as good a time as everyone else? Are they going to feel welcome? They deserve to. If you're my player, I want you to be at ease and have a great time. That's a responsibility I take very seriously. And you should check in with your players once they arrive to see if there's anything you can do to help facilitate that. That could look like checking in with everyone to see what their preferred pronouns are, or having someone who doesn't hear well have the option to sit right next to you. As always, try to be thoughtful and cool, yeah? Take your cues from the people at your table. The next thing I would recommend thinking about is timing. Hopefully the organizers have given you an idea of about how long they want the game to run. Now it's your responsibility to land that plane on time. I would lean towards a game that you think is more likely to run under time than overtime. If a game runs under at a convention or event, congratulations, folks! You had fun, and now you get more time than you thought to hop onto another game or explore the vendor hall. Or specifically, if you're at DragonCon, wait in line for the vendor hall. I plan on lining up early next Monday for next year's con. If the game runs over, that's much harder to deal with. Now you're running into time your players may have planned for other things. There may be someone else scheduled to be at your table next. Also, you may lose the attention of your players. These aren't your friends that are just happy to hang out at your house and snack however long the game takes. These are folks who don't know you and probably don't know each other, and are not sitting in the most ergonomic chairs, I'm pretty willing to guess. Worst case scenario, you have to rush the ending, or you don't get to end it at all, and everyone leaves without any narrative satisfaction. Undertime is definitely better than overtime. After running games for a long time, I have a pretty good feel from the get-go of how long something is going to take. I always then take that estimate and add a little bit of time to it. If at all possible, run your game for a group of friends or family at least once before you take it to the event. See how long it takes. Let them try to break stuff. After you're done, ask them for feedback. It's a win-win. They get to play a new fun game. You get help preparing. It's also smart to build things into the adventure that you can add or skip depending on where you're at with time. If you're using any of the one-shots I've shared with you here on this channel, you'll notice I do that with all of them. I'm always looking at my players, how engaged they are, where their energy level is at, how close it is to time everyone has to go. I make adjustments accordingly. That door had a puzzle to open it? Well, we're tired, so now it doesn't. Now it's a simple lockpick. Everyone's really tired? Well, now there's not even a door there. It's just an open archway. An NPC could suddenly be really helpful if needed, or they could just not even show up if interacting with them is going to take extra time. Have a list in your head or in your hands, whatever works best for you, of adjustments you can make on the fly to account for time, and watch your time as you go. Also, just because you're not at home doesn't mean your players don't need breaks. Know where you need to be at by certain times and take appropriate moments to pause so everyone can breathe and potty and go get a snack. You know, snackos are non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. Another thing to consider is how many players can your game tolerate. I play mostly 5e, and that tends to work best with 4 players, but when I'm running for a convention or something like that, there's often so many more people interested in playing than there are DMs to run. Because of that, I design a game I'm going to take to an event to handle 6. Is that going to be ideal? No. Is it worth a little bit of clunkiness to let more people have the opportunity to play? I think it is. I try to be firm on that limit though. I found anything above 6 players to just be boring for everyone. They have to wait too long between things they can be individually engaged with, and it really pushes that time limit. It makes me risk going over, which again, I hate doing. Combat times go up exponentially. I know there are DMs out there, some of you who are fans of this channel, who run for enormous groups of players all the time. And my stylish rogue's hood is off to you, sirs and madams. I do not know how you do it. With 6 players, keep in mind that you're probably not going to be able to just sit back and let them all act however they want to. Some people are going to be louder and throw themselves into the action. Some are going to be more reserved, but they deserve just as much to enjoy the game and participate. Outside of combat situations where the players don't each have something obvious that they're doing, I won't make people go into a rigid turn order, but I do check in with everyone, especially the quiet ones, and ask what they're up to. If someone starts a conversation with an NPC, I'll let it go for a little bit, and then I'll say, wonderful, we're going to pause that for a second and come back to it. Then I turn to someone else and say, what is your character up to over here? Anyone else have something they would like to do before we go back to that? And I bounce around the table that way. Everyone gets to have their special thing. Everyone gets to be involved. But no one runs away with the action and has all my attention for a long period of time. Don't be afraid to take that pause. I want to minimize the amount of time any one person is sidelined. I always have the quiet people in the corner of my eye. In addition to deliberately making sure I give them chances to speak, if I see them try to speak and get talked over, oh, you best bet I am coming right back to them as soon as I can and saying, hey, so-and-so, it looked like there was something you wanted to say. What's up? We talked about the importance of communicating with the event organizers. You also need to have solid communication with your players as they're getting ready to join you. This will probably start with writing an exciting, succinct description of the adventure you've got on offer. If you listen to my different one-shots that I've posted here on the channel, I usually include a little teaser for players in there to give them an idea of what's coming. This is your first opportunity to get buy-in from them, intrigue them. Also, think of the practical stuff. Let them know what to bring. Do they need to bring a character, or are you providing pre-gen characters? Is there anything they need to prepare? I also recommend letting them know the kind of action they can expect from the game. Is it RP heavy? That might not be for everyone. Let them know that so they can choose a game that suits their tastes. Is it combat heavy? Lots of puzzles? Same thing. The game description is the place to put that info. I also like to include some clear goals in the description. In the case of the Midnight Relic, those goals were 1. Infiltrate a masquerade party. 2. Get a hold of the Midnight Relic. And 3. Escape with your lives. Now you've spent time crafting this tantalizing prompt for the game. My next bit of advice is don't expect anyone to remember what it said. Maybe they didn't read it. They were just pumped there was a game available. Maybe they read it a long time ago. I start out the game by having everyone introduce themselves, do those things we talked about to make sure that everyone is comfortable. Then before I hand out character sheets, I read that prompt out loud. I ask them to think while I'm doing that, while I'm describing the adventure, mull over what kind of class they might want to play in that world and that scenario I'm describing. Let them noodle about it. What would make fun? What would make sense? I make sure I emphasize the goals I put in the description very clearly. I will literally say, goal number 1, infiltrate the party. You're about to loose them in the world with a bunch of people they've never met. Make sure they're confident what direction they all need to be headed together. Next, I have them pick their characters. I had pre-gen characters for them to choose from. That's usually my go-to. I know that I'm familiar with what's on them, with the spells and the abilities. As you're designing your game, think about these characters and build some variety into the story. How might the different types of characters each get a chance to shine? I tend to group some of the classes together when I'm thinking about this. Okay, someone could be a cleric or a paladin. Is there something of religious significance here that they might have valuable knowledge about, or that their deity might have some feelings about? Can I throw in some undead or fiends or both to play for their strengths? Definitely, I'm going to beat some PCs up so they can fulfill their sacred and most annoying duty of healing. What is there for the casters to do? Obviously, they've got combat utility, but are there spots where identify and detect magic could be clutch? Mysterious items that need a solid arcana check. What about my rogues? Where can they sneak? What can they pickpocket? What needs to be unlocked, disarmed? There might be a druid or a ranger. Is there an animal or plant they could chat with? A bard needs a chance to perform, or at the very least charm some people. And of course, what NPCs and monsters can you put in there with the very most punchable faces for your monks, fighters, and barbarians? Something else to think about when you're designing the game is you need to make it unbreakable. I've said it before and I will say it again. One of my favorite things about running games is when someone floors me, absolutely shocks me by approaching a problem in a way I would never have thought of. People's brains work in such different ways, and I think that's magic. You open up a game to over 30 players, I promise you, they're going to do things you did not account for. You need your story to be flexible enough to allow you to roll with those miracles when they come your way. Make sure there's multiple ways to solve puzzles, to open locks. Don't let there be anything that can bring the action to a screeching halt. Don't make the whole story depend on one thing going one way. And honestly, once you've got everything planned out, take a look at it and consider simplifying it a little bit. It's just like the ladies say, you accessorize and take one or two things off before you walk out the door. Again, you're playing with strangers, some of whom may be totally new to playing. They're definitely going to be new to playing with you. They don't know your personality, your style, your cues. In the game I ran at this con, the PCs had to find an object. I gave the parties an object that the secret society they worked for had sent them with that acted kind of like a dowsing rod to find the midnight relic, a Geiger counter of sorts. It gave them a general direction they knew they needed to travel in to find this relic. You don't have time for them to flounder. Making certain core things straightforward doesn't take away from the fun of your game. As long as there's a cool setting, intriguing NPCs, a quest to complete, choices that have consequences, the potential for big successes or miserable failure, it will be an adventure and it will be fun. Being challenged? Fun. Being confused and stuck? Not so fun. That leads me to my next point, and this is an important one. As you're playing the game, don't make them fish for important information or fall down irrelevant rabbit holes. If they're floundering or going down the wrong path, find a way to give them the info that they need. And if you need to go above the table to do it in a very direct way, that's fine in this kind of situation. This is something that's actually different for me when I'm playing with friends or playing in a longer game. A couple of parties I played with at DragonCon, for example, got really hung up on some symbols on my map. There was a mosaic on the floor, and it was significant. If they stepped on it, a projection of a demon popped up and chatted with them. If they made that demon mad, the whole thing on the floor turned into a pool of maggots. Good old pool of maggots. Classic. But the images on that mosaic didn't matter. They were just part of the image I grabbed off of Dungeon Fog when I was making the map. Now, during a long campaign, I would 100% let my players fiddle around with those symbols and obsess over them until they convinced me there was something going on there. But at the convention, I only had a short amount of time to tell this story. I straight up told them, hey, I like how you think, but there's nothing significant about that image. There might be other things you see that are important, though, so good instinct. Keep it up. A final bit of advice for you is to remember this is a game. The goal is to have fun, and I promise if you're wound up tight like 50 feet of hempen rope in an adventurer's pack, everyone will sense that, and it will color their experience. Some nerves are normal. If you're feeling them, acknowledge it from the get-go. Before I dive into any game, I remind everyone that we're not going to worry about being perfect. We're going to tell a story. I ask them if any of them think they're going to need some extra help with the system. Make sure they're not afraid to ask. We're going to play a game. We're going to have fun. I remind them that while the stakes may be incredibly high for their characters, they're extremely low for us in reality. So, what do you think, my friends? Have you ever run a game for the public before? If there's anything you'd add to this list, throw it down in the comments. And if you've been a player at an event like that, what kind of experience did you have? Were you at DragonCon this week? Tell us all about it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Oh, I almost forgot. The new edition of D&D came out this week. Big deal. I got my copy, but haven't had time to cozy up with it yet. If you have been poking around in that big, beautiful book, let me know what you think. Thanks again to everyone who played with me over the weekend, and thank you all for listening to me ramble. Remember to tune in for some spooky September one-shots in the coming weeks, including The Midnight Relic, a gothic horror heist, coming your way next week. Also, we are dangerously close to reaching 500 subscribbles. Let me know if you have thoughts on how we should celebrate. I'm sure I'll be throwing up a poll about it soon. Make sure you've subscribbled so you see those polls when they come out. Like, subscribble, comment, and share. It all helps. I appreciate ya. As always, thank you for exploring the feminine urge to play Dungeons and Dragons with me, Owlbear Rogue.